Hello, everybody, and welcome to Whispers Radio here on AM 1600 WKKX, the Valley's Watchdog, and UPRN, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. It is 6:08, 49 degrees here in downtown Wheeling. It's been a nice day today, Lola.
Day. It's going to be very cold.
When?
Tonight.
Is it really?
29.
What?
Isn't it supposed to snow come like Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe either one of you.
Ha! Ha!
I don't care
you
what
know
you
what
believe.
happens when you don't believe us.
I know, I'm usually wrong. Hold on.
Yes, you are.
See, tomorrow night, showers. Hold on. Friday, snow. That is crap. 80% chance. I'm not believing it.
Is it
50% chance.
Horrible. It goes from like 70s
I know it.
to like snows. And that's Lisa's birthday too. So,
Aw.
yeah. Well, I think she's ready for a little bit of white stuff. So,
Oh, not this girl.
Dandruff?
yes. Yes, Jordan. She's purposely washing her hair and like. How do you
Lie.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, you don't wash your hair. That's what gives you. I don't
She
know.
throws the head and shoulders away. Like, I don't need that.
Who needs this? Wah!
Seriously.
Don't do that again.
Oh, have you seen? Remember when Ghost Lab was at the pen?
Yes.
Have you seen the episode?
No, is it any good? Is that no?
I am becoming convinced that there really isn't much down there.
What happened?
Very little. Very little. The bats attacked the girl down in the hole.
Well, that's always lovely.
And I kept yelling, "Put your light out. Just put your light out and don't move."
Open your mouth. And
They
try to
were
catch it.
they were in the sugar shack, and you could hear what sounded probably like footsteps, but that was it. The only thing they got were a couple really pretty good EVPs in Red Cell.
Really?
Now that's where we had some activity too, was in Red Cell, but for the most part, and for spending 2 nights down there.
They spent 2 nights there and only got
Yeah.
EVP and Red Cell?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, seriously, this is not the first show that hasn't really gotten anything.
Taps didn't get much?
Nope. And
They said they got a lot of personal experiences, but nothing on camera.
see, and the thing was, too, with Taps and Ghost Lab, neither one went to, well, that we saw anyway, to the infirmary or to the crazy person part or to the gallows, and those are places that, we were told, and people that we were with, particularly up in the infirmary, had personal experiences.
Yeah, we had experiences in the, not this year, but the year prior, yeah.
Yeah, in the gym.
Yeah, we got in the gym, and was it, I don't remember if it was the infirmary or the psych ward. That's where, we heard the pounding on the wall. It was like everybody went home. There was like 5 of us left.
I thought you were in the gym that time. No?
And we were like, hey, if you're here, knock twice on the wall real hard, and you hear bam, bam.
I'm
You're
just,
like, huh.
either the ghosties are really getting tired.
That's what I was about to say. Wonder if they're wearing.
We're wearing our welcomes.
They're all on vacation. That's,
Well, it's like truly, and I heard this on. I'm watching way too much of this crap, you guys. Paranormal State, of which you know how I really feel about that show,
but you watch it still, so
well, only because they were running a marathon, and I was working Sunday, and I got home and it was on. But he said that really, how rude of us as living beings to walk into some of these places and almost expect them to perform for us.
like parlor trick.
Yeah. Or like circus animals.
Yeah.
They don't do stuff on cue, which that's why I'm always amazed with Taps that they only hit a place and they only stay one night, and sometimes it's not even, because I think when they start that, like where it'll say 5 hours into the investigation, I think that's 5 hours from the time they got there and took their first tour. So they're not even there for a really long time, and you would think that you would want to be there at least 2 days. But I'll tell you, I'm really infatuated with Destination Truth
Yeah, still.
Josh Gates, I just think he's great.
Yeah, I was thinking about you the other day with that because there was a news story talking about that forest the suicide forest.
Yeah.
And even just being like it was just this journalist following this guy in, and they were just talking about it. It was creepy because they come up to this car, and it's this Japanese gentleman that's talking about, well, this has been sitting here, it was whoever went into the forest didn't come back out. And I'm just like chills, and I'm like, we're not even talking about ghosts or anything. He's just there, talking about people committing suicide.
Yeah.
But and
that is a creepy episode.
Well,
I saw that one.
They look into the car and there's a map folded out there.
Yeah.
And
it's just sad.
It just left. That was it.
Yeah. What gets me in that episode when they go through the woods and you see the tents, and there's like tents out in the woods, just like sitting there, the sleeping bag and everything's still laying in there.
That and the pictures tore up underneath the tree.
You're like, oh my god,
that's enough right there. I don't need ghosts. I mean, some things, you don't need ghosts for something to be.
Well, especially
eerie,
okay. Well, listen,
and that's just sad and creepy.
Yeah.
And
it's eerie, but look at how that culture views like extreme situations, like somebody commits suicide, like that's all about evil spirits, and I mean they put such an emphasis on all of that, like whether or not scientifically there's something in the woods.
There's something in the woods,
but they, with their culture, man, those woods are like death, hell,
because they really do believe in the spirit staying on. And it's but the other one is Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel. These three guys, they don't have camera crews and producers following them around. It's the three of them. Two of them have a camera, and that's basically it. So it's, because I feel bad on these other shows for the cameramen. They're the ones who are going down these rocky inclines first because they have to get a shot of the stars coming down. And that's another thing that gets me about these shows. Don't show me their reaction. I don't care. Keep the camera on the area that everybody is looking at, not on the star's face, because I don't care if they're going, oh my goodness, what was that? I want to see or attempt to see what they have seen. It makes no sense. So with Ghost Adventures, that's what you're seeing, because they're carrying the cameras and it's just the three of them, and you're seeing what they're seeing because, and then what's up with these? Now, everybody knows it's hard to distinguish shapes and things on a FLIR, not a thermal imager. You'd think they'd be a little bit more careful in how they wave those suckers around. It's like, and it's
you know why? You know why? Because they don't have to pay for them. Those things are like $18,000, and whatever channel they're working on is who bought that, and they're like, oh, this is just a cool piece of equipment. We get to do this, and this, and that.
Well, but you can't even see. It's hard enough to distinguish what you're looking at, and you know what would be perfect, and they may have these, is a FLIR and an IR camera, video camera, combined, so that when you're looking at the screen, you're seeing the split screen.
That would be
so
good.
that
and you're not making assumptions.
That would be awesome.
Okay, you're facing a
Guess
doorway.
who just made $1 million? Lola Miller.
Yeah, somebody else on Discovery Channel will steal my idea, but
that's all right. We got it recorded right here.
That to me would make the most sense, because then okay, this outline here is a door. This is what we were seeing, and this is the thermal image of the door.
Yeah.
But they just wave them around, and it's all jerky, and, oh, did you see that? No! Who can see it? You're moving the damn thing too much. Like I said, been watching these shows way too much. I need some. Have you seen Walking Dead?
No.
Oh, it is so... Jordan.
Oh.
How much would he love this?
Oh,
Zombies, Jordan, in Atlanta. Oh,
yes.
It's amazing.
I
haven't watched the latest one.
Well, I've only seen the first episode because it's on demand. But, ew, that horse scene.
Come on now. Don't go there.
Gross.
No! I want to watch it and experience it. What? So it's just zombies in Atlanta?
For some, I don't.
It's based on a comic book. It's
Oh, it is.
Yeah. So I mean,
Lola quit watching it now.
No. It's a good kind of. I like the whole premise of how it's set up. You know, this guy is.
But now I don't know why everybody has become a zombie, with the exception of a few people.
And nobody does. You kinda know,
okay.
I mean,
so
that's kind of the premise of it. You know, this guy's a sheriff in a small town. He gets shot during like this car chase where they try to, and he wakes up. He goes into a coma, and he wakes up, and
days later.
Yeah, and who knows how long?
Yeah,
really.
truly.
I mean, it could be months. And he kind of falls out of his bed, yells for a nurse. Nobody comes. He comes in the hallway, and the place is just destroyed.
Bullet holes all over,
yeah.
blood all over. Then he sees these pair of doors that are chain shut at the end of the hall, and it says, "Don't open, dead inside."
Uh-huh.
And you see the door crack open, and this icky hand reach out, and people doing this on it, So he runs, and he runs into a dad and a son, and the kid clocks him with a shovel because nobody knows if you get scratched or bitten by a zombie, then you get this high fever and you turn into a zombie. So they didn't know what he was, and that part surrounding the father and son is just sad. It makes you sad.
I know, it tore me up too.
It will. You're
You're gonna love this
It's
show.
a great show. I wasn't going to watch it, and then Bill asked me. He said, "How come you're not watching Walking Dead?"
Does Bill watch it?
He did. He saw the first episode, but and being as he just got out of surgery, I don't know that he really wants to watch it right now. But John asked me about it today, and I said, "Yeah, it's good." And then you watch Sons of Anarchy.
Yes, that one is. I don't watch that one.
I'm not big into biker gangs.
Oh, this is so good though. Well, anyway, there's a new show. This is there's the episode tonight, and then next week is the season finale. And there's one about a boxer trying to make a comeback that's coming on, I think, for all of December and part of January, because then Justified comes back on.
I haven't watched that one either.
Oh man, see, I watched Justified because it takes place in the county in Kentucky where all my people live.
You're probably watching the Detroit 187.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, because I can, I know if they're saying the correct street names and all this, and they are. They're doing a brilliant job.
And I'm glad. I was upset Detroit kind of was a little bit against them coming in, and I'm thinking, you kind of need some money coming into the area.
Well, and here's the thing: it was the police department. No, the police department was for it. The chief of police. It was the mayor. And I don't know why Mr. Bing would have been against it. I know it's showing 2 murders per episode, but you have to have that. And I don't think anybody believes that that's
Nobody's
really
going like, oh, my Lord, New York's just falling apart. There's these murders constantly. Yeah,
because of Law and Order, and you got 20 of them that
you gotta
run
have
every
a show.
week. Yeah. And they're really showing the police in a brilliant light, and the city. I mean, sure, they're showing the parts that look like a worn, torn area, but they're also showing the nice parts. So I don't know what the heck the big flap was all about.
Yeah, we had 2 callers. One saying, talking about the ghost adventures at the pen.
Yeah.
That our very own regular caller, Barb Applegarth, is interviewed on that show.
Oh, with Ghost Adventures?
The one with Ghost Adventures.
Oh, I wish I'd known they were coming here. I would, because they're really good.
And then the caller just now said that The Walking Dead, there's only been like 6 episodes.
Yeah, it started
they're
Halloween night.
Episode 5, I think he said Sunday.
I think we're 5's coming up, so yeah, you're not too far behind.
And I hope they haven't been bleeping them off of On Demand.
I don't know. I know the 4th episode just happened, so.
Oh, I gotta check here. Because I'll be really upset, because I haven't been recording them.
I don't have the number.
I got it.
Yeah, I don't. The latest episodes, it just gets better and better. I mean, the first episode was good. I got Lisa. Lisa actually watches The Walking Dead. That's how good it is. I mean, she doesn't like that kind of stuff.
You know how she doesn't like TV.
But the story is what's important on it. So,
Now my question is: Renee Eddy watching it? Nora's boy, is your wife watching The Walking Dead?
She is.
Because if she's not, she needs to be.
I mean,
I don't know. I guess he's listening. He's on the chat room.
Does a bear live in the woods?
Okay, our guest is on, so introduce him, Nikki.
I think I'm doing the introduction today.
You are?
Yeah, switch it up a bit. Tonight, our first guest is Mr. Nick Redfern. He is the author of several UFO books. His research centers around determining what has been learned about UFO subject, and at the official level in Britain, we're going to be talking about his new book. Nick, are you with us? Hello?
I was about to answer, yes, I am. I'm right here.
There he is.
Yes, I'm right here.
Now, because my computer's far enough away to where I can't see with my glasses on, apparently, I can't read the title of your new book. Is it the NASA Conspiracies?
NASA Conspiracies, yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to mess it up too bad before you got on the air.
Right. Yeah.
So how's there? We talked to you a while back, and I remember talking to you about at that time. I know we went into Bigfoot because that just bothers Jordan half to death, and because he's one of those people that just hates Bigfoot. But I mean, you've wrote books on almost everything I can think of paranormal wise, except for like psychics, I think.
I don't really sort of delve into that area, mainly because it just doesn't interest me. More than
that's the way I am as well. But so
things like UFOs and Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, those are sort of the things I tend to write more about.
Now, what is your favorite subject before we get into NASA conspiracies? Which one do you like to delve into the most?
I probably would say the cryptozoology, like the unknown animal side of things, and the reason being because that sort of allows you to sort of get out, road trips, investigations, that's the sort of thing I like. When you actually write in the books, you kind of just sat at home for 3 months, hunkered down in front of the computer for 10 hours a day. But I enjoy this sort of, going out on the expeditions and tracking around the woods and that sort of thing. So.
Now, I'm trying to remember, and I might be confusing you with someone else, but you had one of your books was optioned, I think, for a movie, correct?
Well, actually, that was the rumor, but no, it was all sort of internet.
Okay.
Don't you love when the internet makes you better than you are?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it did sort of help promote it, but no, it did sort of got all sort of blown up all out of proportion, just based on the fact that there was interest in it. So.
But you'd be okay with that, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah, no, if it had happened, yeah.
And if I remember, it was the book. What was it? The Three Men.
Yeah.
Okay, see, and that would be an awesome book or movie too.
Well, thanks. It's sort of like a comedy road trip about some of the investigations me and a couple of friends did back in England. But I mean, something could still happen with it. You never know. It's just, it's one of those things where it's basically like a limbo situation, I suppose.
And who should play you in the movie?
Someone dashingly handsome and
Pierce Brosnan.
Well, if it's Pierce, I'll buy a ticket right away.
Well, I guess it's sort of a similar voice. So.
There you go.
That's all you need nowadays.
But see, now this is a radio, and you'd be like, "Well, I look just like him." That should be your. Well, of course, I look just like him. He got his looks from me.
Yep, that's right.
So they based James Bond right around me. So yeah. So now the NASA conspiracies, and the last time we talked about this, and then not just because there's all kinds of other things other than the moon hoax landing.
Yeah.
We got all kinds of emails, and mainly because there was one other subject brought up during the interview, and that just got, and the next thing it's just like the email starts kind of turning into a river of fire. How that goes. But number one, a lot of people kind of get into the, well, how dare you say that we didn't do this, kind of thing, or you're being unpatriotic, and I don't think patriotism really goes into whether or not something actually happened. I mean, that's. But where do you stand on this? Before do you think we went to the moon?
Well, yeah, actually, I do. I mean, the book is called The NASA Conspiracies because it addresses NASA conspiracies.
Sure.
Now, most of the things I looked at in the book, I do think actually have quite a bit of validity to them in terms of that there has been some sort of cover-up of, for example, UFO data and things like the so-called face on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the whole moon landing thing is concerned, I'm not personally convinced that the evidence that those who say we didn't go to the moon actually stands up to scrutiny. I think there's more evidence that we did than there's evidence that we didn't. And I think there's actually strong evidence in some cases. For example, just a couple of years ago, what a lot of people don't realize, and this doesn't get mentioned that often in the whole conspiracy realm, but I mentioned this in the book, is that only a couple of years ago, a particular NASA satellite that traveled across the moon, over the moon in the sky, actually photographed the site of one of the Apollo landings and actually caught the ground area where it came down. You can clearly make out, like obviously very small, but shadowy things right in the place where NASA said the landers came down.
Wow.
Now, of course, but on the other hand, you have the people who say we didn't go, say, well, it's a NASA photograph. They've obviously retouched the picture. So in other words, some of these conspiracies are kind of like never-ending. It's almost like a circular argument.
Well, they self-generate. I mean, if you buy into the first, I mean, they're going to do anything they can to, and I think that's where, and I'll preface this by saying, did we lose him? No. Oh, I was going to that was weird. I'll preface this by saying I don't believe this is the case. I don't believe, I remember watching the Challenger when I was a child, but the person that we had on, brought that up as saying, well, they, NASA blew up the Challenger to keep their secret alive, and I'm thinking, I was kind of caught off guard, but I was like, what? Did you run into that at all when you were researching this?
Yeah, actually, there is some very interesting, there are some very interesting conspiracy theories around the Challenger explosion. Now, I don't think for 1 minute NASA deliberately blew up the space shuttle, nor do I think it was to hide UFO secrets or whatever. I mean, hypothetically, there would be far easier ways than blowing up a space shuttle, just to keep somebody quiet. But what I did find was that I used the Freedom of Information Act and actually got hold of a very extensive FBI file, which the FBI have now declassified, which talked about how, following the Challenger destruction, a number of people had got in touch with the FBI, just members of the public and some people in the entertainment industry whose job it was to analyze film footage, and people who worked in the whole video world, etc. And they said that they felt that they'd seen things on the footage when the shuttle exploded that looked like missiles or laser beams fired at the craft. And the FBI actually took these claims and theories very, very seriously and visited the people, sat down with them and watched the footage. It's kind of like people who said, they saw missiles or whatever fired at the Pentagon. It was, on 9/11. It's kind of like that, where you have people coming out with ideas that, the shuttle was sabotage, and then phoning the FBI up and saying, we think we saw this red beam of light, or et cetera, et cetera. And the FBI file that's now been declassified is about 2 inches thick, and it covers literally a couple of years' worth of data, but primarily, obviously, around 1986 when the first shuttle explosion happened. And so it does go to show that, there have been space shuttle conspiracies, but the FBI, for the most part, suggested that what people were just seeing were like sparks from the initial explosion, not something actually hitting the shuttle or anything like that.
Okay, so they found nothing at all then.
No, and again, it's probably with the moon landing story and the space shuttle story. Those are two of the conspiracies that, when I sort of addressed them, I felt they didn't really have merit. I thought, and still do, that these could be explainable in far more down-to-earth ways than, some vast conspiracy.
Gotcha. Now, well, let's go ahead then. We'll leave those, because those are kind of, I think a lot of people have beat them to death over the years. I wanted to get into some of these other ones. One of my favorites is always, the face on Mars. And, for people out there who don't know, what exactly is the face on Mars, and kind of the history behind that, and then we'll go on from there.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Well, the face on Mars is, for people who aren't aware of it, it's basically literally what it sounds like. Back in the mid-1970s, when NASA sent one of its unmanned probes to Mars, and it was photographing the surface of Mars as it orbited it, it photographed, not deliberately, this was just like one of many hundreds and hundreds of pictures that were taken, but it photographed one particular area called Cydonia. And then when the photograph was blown up, it looked for all the world like there was this huge face staring upwards from the surface, kind of like the Egyptian Sphinx or something like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought, well, that looks like the Sphinx. It looks like something that we would have built thousands of years ago. And of course, NASA said, oh, it's just a trick of the light. It's like when people see faces in clouds, that sort of thing. They were saying you're just trying to interpret it in the way that you recognize a face. And of course, the debate at the time, although it was certainly raised, it didn't sort of reach the levels that it is at today until sort of the late 1980s onwards, when it really began to take off big time, where you had like a whole face on Mars research community of authors, investigators, etc., all saying that this looks like a structured face of some sort. And there was even research done suggesting that you could see nostrils and eyeballs and irises even in the eyes. And then somebody else found a number of what looked like pyramid-type formations not too far away, but that looked like they were kind of crumbled as if they'd been, stood there for thousands of years or whatever. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, the thing about, and maybe you can help me with this, on the Sphinx, it's not facing up, it's facing, if I'm standing in front of it, I'm looking, kind of almost not into its eyes, but right at it. Why? The thing that always got me with this, why would they build it facing up? Unless, of course, there are spacefaring people that, advertising, hey, we're right here,
Well, look at was it the Nazca lines?
And
they're facing up.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're facing where, you can only see them if you look down. So, yeah. So, I mean, how does that go into these theories?
Well, that actually is one of the chief theories, that it was designed to be seen from above. It wasn't designed to be seen from the people on the ground, so to speak. Kind of like, the Nazca lines. The whole idea that if there's somebody existed on Mars, hundreds of thousands of years ago and either wiped themselves out or the planet, just decayed and life came to an end when the atmosphere came to an end. But maybe they built this thing as sort of a memory of their race. Now, of course, it's like if you see the Sphinx from above, you cannot make out any details. So arguably, if they wanted to attract someone's attention or leave some sort of memory of people who might come visiting, they probably would want to be seen from above, because you just wouldn't be able to make any details out if the face was looking forwards, outwards. Now, of course, as I said, there are a number of theories regarding what lies at the heart of the face on Mars. I mean, some people, as I said, sort of allude to the idea that maybe, and there is good evidence of this, that Mars did at one point in its ancient past have an atmosphere that may not have been too dissimilar to the Earth. There's a lot of evidence of ancient erosion on Mars, which looks like massive amounts of water. For example, some of the larger lakes and even oceans on our Earth, if they were to disappear tomorrow, we'd still see the effects of erosion, with the tide coming in and things like that. And we see that on Mars, and, where there's water, there's often a good chance for life. So I don't think, if face on Mars is artificial, and I actually think there are some good grounds for thinking it is, I don't think this was a case of somebody who died out, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. I think we could be talking hundreds of thousands of years ago. And, all we're seeing now is the sort of tattered remnants of whatever their civilization was. But, of course, the most frustrating thing of all, of course, is that we're not actually able to get to Mars. It's at least a manned mission. I think it's been suggested that even with all our most advanced technology, to get to Mars and back would take something like 2 years. And then what a lot of people forget is sort of the psychological issues of astronauts being cooped up together in a little tin box for 2 years.
Well, here recently they've even been saying, okay, let's just forget about coming back. Yeah. We'll just send them there, and that'll be it. We'll land them there, and they're stuck. They'll never be able to come back. And I think that's been.
There probably are people who would be willing to do that.
I don't think I'd be one of them, but yeah, you're right. There probably would be.
Yeah. But again, it shows the sort of sheer scale and size of outer space and the problems of trying to prove it. And of course, NASA doesn't really want to go down the path of investigating it, really. Some people suggest that they've got sinister reasons. They actually know what the face on Mars is, etc., etc. Other people think that NASA wants to try and demystify the face because they don't want to have to be forced into spending money going to somewhere that they really don't believe is anything strange.
Yeah, and I know they released, and I can't remember how long ago it was, but at least a couple years, another picture of the same, exact place, and it's kind of like, well, look, the light, the light's a little different here. See, it's the same place. It's not a face, And
yeah, exactly. That's why, with this particular story, you have as many believers and disbelievers as you have people who, on one hand, think, Kennedy was shot by the CIA, and others who think he was just shot by Lee Harvey Oswald.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of that situation. And, of course, like a lot of these conspiracies, the problem is getting the evidence. If it's something like the JFK case, well, pretty much everybody's dead. Who do you ask? With the face on Mars, it's that far away. How do you get there? Now, what I would say, though, is that a lot of people have actually, with credible backgrounds, have looked at some of the photographs and some of the structures nearby, and have made a very good argument for the notion that some of these things do look artificial. Now, the mere fact that some of these things have been suggested as looking like pyramids has led some people to think that stories about the Egyptian gods, etc., are actually the last remnants of this Martian race making the way to the Earth or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Their planet decayed and got destroyed. They came here. And a lot of our legends of, as I said, the Egyptians and the Incas, etc., building their pyramids and being taught by these advanced gods may actually be, sort of distorted legends of the final couple of craft or whatever making a last sort of valiant escape from Mars before the atmosphere collapsed or something like that. And then others think, no, that's just science fiction. So, we're sort of caught in the middle somewhere, trying to make some sense out of all the craziness.
Well, and evidence that's out there, or even that NASA's kind of hiding. Gary McKinnon was somebody, a hacker from Great Britain, that I really was hoping that if he'd got something. Okay, yes, it's bad to hack into it, but you did. I was hoping that, he kind of like a WikiLeaks kind of thing, all of a sudden post all of the stuff there, and it's like, well, it's out there now, so let's take a look at what they've got, and I was hoping something was there. I mean, so did he find any evidence, Mars or anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, McKinnon's story is an interesting one because part of it is to do with the timing. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that somebody back in the 1990s, a Welshman named Matthew Bevan, young guy who was only like 18 at the time, in about 1996, did exactly the same thing as McKinnon. He hacked into NASA and the Air Force looking for secret information on UFOs. But the court case completely collapsed against Bevan because what happened was that when American authorities came over to the to the UK, they refused to bring any evidence proving what Bevan had done, because they said, well, if we bring the evidence, it's going to reveal the contents of classified files. So the judge basically said, well, if you're not going to provide any proof, then we're going to throw the case out of court. That's what happened. Now with with McKinnon, what happened with him was that here's the time. He shouldn't have done it at all. If you're going to hack into anybody's government or military and get caught, you've only got yourself to blame. And I don't encourage anyone to do it.
Not a good idea.
No, but what I do think is that because of the sort of current era we're living in, the whole climate of terror, etc., I actually wonder if the trial that he will get will sort of reflect what he actually did, or if he's going to be used as a scapegoat to legitimate terrorists around the world to say, hey, if you try anything similar, you're going to get the 70, 80 years we're going to give this guy. So he'll be kind of put on a pedestal in that respect as
made an example of.
Yeah. Now, that's not to say, that he didn't do anything stupid. He did. But in saying that, he did, by his own admission, come across some weird stuff like photographs of anomalous objects in the sky, He also said that he came across this weird list referring to something known as non-terrestrial officers, which nobody has been able to work out what that means, but there's been suggestions that it could be a reference to like a secret space program that is sort of running alongside, the publicly admitted one, and that possibly NASA or the Department of Defense may have far more advanced spacecraft than they're admitting to, and this is one of the areas that McKinnon's whole thing about these non-terrestrial officers delved into. But in saying that, when you talk about the WikiLeaks, he said he just read everything online and, didn't print anything, didn't download anything. He just saw it and then got off. So again, we're left with tantalizing stories. And, the whole idea of non-terrestrial officers, I don't think, McKinnon or anyone would just make up a weird term like that. I think he probably did see it. I think the big question is, what does it mean? And we haven't been able to work that out yet.
And that's kind of, we've had a while back where we were talking a couple of times about Serpo. Is it something? Yeah, and it, and they were talking about people that actually had left to go to with this exchange with the planet Serpo and so forth, and kind of makes you wonder if that's actually maybe a little bit of maybe we do have kind of an exchange, and almost even like a ambassador maybe from there or something. That would be a non-terrestrial, unless I'm thinking of a little bit different.
No, I mean a good analogy is that when the stealth bomber, this sort of big black triangular shaped aircraft, was wheeled out the hangars and presented to the world in 1990. What a lot of people don't realise is that very prototype drawing board versions are actually being made back in 1975, a full 15 years before the shuttle was admitted to exist. Before the stealth bomber, was admitted to exist. And so, in other words, if a craft, like the stealth bomber, can be hidden for nearly 20 years, and if people see it, they might be thinking they're seeing a UFO before they found out what it was. I don't think it's impossible that the military or the scientific community with links to the Defense Department could be flying things around now, even in space, that they're quite happy for us to think we're seeing UFOs, because it acts as a good cover for possibly something along the lines of like a classified space program, or at least, certain vehicles, maybe not a whole space program, but certain craft that we've built or developed, that can travel much further and faster than things like the space shuttle.
Now, what exactly do you think NASA has on UFOs? I mean, one of my favorite, discussions about all the, especially with the, astronauts being out there, Edgar Mitchell, almost, emphatically, yes, they exist. They, they're out there. We need to be concerned about them and discussing it. Of course, NASA, it seems like they're trying to distance themselves from those statements. Do you think they have anything at all on UFOs? I mean, it's and will they ever come out with it? Yeah,
well, that's the big question. I think they've got a lot of material. For example, they commissioned a report in the early 1960s called the Brookings Report, and this was basically a look at like future trends in outer space travel. And one of the recommendations, or one of the areas covered, I should say, was what would happen if the human race one day encountered aliens, whether in person or via radio waves or whatever. And the Brookings Report actually talks quite in depth about how if we were confronted by a far more intelligent species, that our society could collapse in the same way that, when the settlers came over and basically sort of reorganized and partly destroyed, Native American Indian cultures, or the same as when the English went to Australia, and the Aboriginal cultures sort of fragmented and collapsed. The Brookings Report talks about how that could happen to us, and it also talks about the idea of not when the general public should be told if evidence of alien existence has been found, but if the general public should be told. And this was right at the sort of the early formative years of NASA. And my view, as I sort of express in the book, is that this recommendation has probably been noted throughout the years and has at least influenced the idea that NASA wants to try and play down the UFO subject for fear that, this whole angle of people and society crumbling, whether it has validity to it or not, the fact that NASA commissioned a report that said that was a possibility, I think allows for some of this, NASA's decision to sort of distance itself from the whole subject. I think that's one of the things that causes that. Now, there are several good cases where we have clear evidence of NASA involvement in some very weird UFO incidents. There's one I talk about in the book in the whole chapter where I actually got a number of documents on this, again, through the Freedom of Information Act, where some sort of egg-shaped object had crashed on a mountainside in Bolivia in 1978, in May 1978. And in this case, all sorts of checks were done to see, was it an American craft, was it a Russian space satellite, and everything was ruled out. And NASA supposedly sent some personnel down there to the crash site and saw this sort of huge indentation on the mountainside where it looked like something had slammed into it at an angle and then sort of created like a gouge all the way down the side of this huge hill. And the story was that the device, whatever it was being brought to the capital city of Bolivia, and NASA was going to investigate it, and then lo and behold, the trail goes cold. NASA said, "Oh well, we sent people, but we looked into it and we couldn't find any validity to it." But then we have other people saying, "No, they came down and there was an object recovered and studied." So we've got cases like that, which are kind of like NASA's own Roswell, I suppose. Where they investigated was reputedly like a crashed UFO incident.
Now, do you think NASA, excuse me, do you think they're in any way at all working towards disclosing any of their information? I've heard rumors that they're in some ways working with, the Vatican. They're working with perhaps other, I don't want to say agencies, but other groups that are. Yeah. Everybody says it's kind of starting to maybe start slowly coming out. Is there any validity to that at all? Maybe especially the Vatican part, because I know they mentioned kind of an interesting, I can't remember the exact wording, but saying, well, maybe there is something out there. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually do think, well, there's absolutely no doubt that there's definitely something to the notion that the Vatican is becoming more and more involved in issues relating to outer space and to, theoretical ideas that there could be aliens out there. And they've covered several angles. One is, the implications that this has for, for their particular church and their belief system. And the other one is, how they would integrate it into their belief systems. But equally, the Vatican also has just a deep interest in outer space, period. They have their own, there's a Vatican telescope, Vatican observatory. They've been heavily involved in working with NASA. Now, it's interesting that, certainly their work with NASA has increased at the same time that they've been making more and more statements all about the feasibility and, the theoretical angle of alien life being out there and coming to the Earth. And, of course, this has opened the floodgates to theories that, well, something's going on behind the scenes. And I don't actually rule that out. I think, the very fact that NASA and the Vatican have been talking on issues relative to alien life, you have to wonder, is there some reasoning that goes beyond just the innocent angle of looking at it theoretically? There's been a lot of sort of discussion and debate as to whether or not they both have some sort of awareness that there's something going on and that slowly and subtly they're kind of acclimatizing us to the idea that, yes, this is all going on, and what better way to do that than to, get something like the church behind them and then slowly, sort of carefully get the story out bit by bit until everybody's kind of acclimatized to it, I suppose.
Well, you were kind of running close to the end of the time, so I have to ask this. What do you think, or has NASA responded to your book?
Not yet, no. It's literally only just come out, but I guess if I vanish in the next couple of days...
we'll know what happened.
Well, you have my number. If they're after you, don't call. No, I'm just... they'll come after me next,
Yeah, I mean, joking aside, what I've tried to do with the book is not sensationalize. As I said, with things like the space shuttle, for example, the conspiracy theories there, I used official FBI files, and, with the Face on Mars scenario, I, interviewed people with credible backgrounds who'd analysed it and quoted astronauts, etc., who'd spoken on the record. So I've tried to stay away from the whole kind of Mr. X told me ABC. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I've tried to go with where we can, even though it's controversial, we can actually validate it through documents and people speaking actually on the record.
And there was a question I really wanted to get to earlier, and I was looking at the time. I do have to ask, because you did, you're always reason I can't talk. The reason I always liked your book, you do research very well, and the question, it's about, is there any, outbreaks of lethal alien viruses, that NASA might know about, that they're, that they have evidence of. Did you find any evidence of that?
Well, I found witness testimony. I actually interviewed a man for the book who had actually been involved in a study for NASA that looked into the whole angle of what would happen if, astronauts visited visited Mars or somewhere like that, came back, and they were contaminated by, some sort of virus that, because it never existed on the Earth, we had no defense against. Somebody just trod on a microbe and it stuck on their boot or whatever, and it came back. Now, that in itself is like a theoretical study, but the guy I interviewed said that when the report was actually submitted to NASA, it was quite clear that there seemed to be people within NASA who knew a great deal more about real alien viruses that went beyond the sort of theoretical angle of what if this happened. And he actually concluded that somewhere within NASA there was like a deep fear that, yes, something had been brought back, but luckily they got it contained. And it was just sort of the fear of hysteria that, actually prevented them from wanting to admit this. So I actually think that's something we really do need to be aware of. It's, we're not talking about bug-eyed little aliens, but we are talking about the potential for, unleashing a pandemic, an epidemic.
And that would be a lot more...
No way, yeah,
we'd
have
have
just no way to fight it off. It's like if aliens wanted to destroy us, don't use laser guns or whatever, just release some sort of biological agents into the atmosphere that we don't have any defense against. I think...
And we as humans...
Don't tell them that.
I say we as humans would never ever use that kind of thing to fight wars.
No, it wouldn't work.
It's crazy. Yeah, so it's, and ever since I read the Andromeda Strain from Michael Crichton, I've always been, because that was the one thing I'm like, man, every time I hear a meteor, I was like, oh, that's it, we're dead. So.
But joking aside, that that could be the way.
Oh yeah,
we would go out. It wouldn't be with bombs and missiles or whatever. It would just be something where, our bodily defenses break down. So.
Wow. All right. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll have you back on in the future. So
I want to let you know and our listeners to know we do have your books up on our website. I think we got all of them, don't we, Nick?
He has quite a bit. I got quite a bit on there, so I think I've got them all.
We have a lot of your books on our website.
You can keep finding them all. Yes. Yeah, so.
Thumbnail pictures. So all of our listeners got to do is click on it. It goes right to your Amazon site. And
great stuff. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a good one.
You too.
Bye. I felt like I couldn't keep up. I don't know much about NASA.
Yeah.
Well, you know how I am. Conspiracies everywhere.
Yeah, they shoot stuff into space.
Don't let Lola lie to you. He's got an accent. Lola loves every second of it.
Yeah. Stop reading my IMs out loud.
What now?
One thing I want... Well, never mind. One thing I do want to ask you, Nick, and I probably should have asked him, but when you were talking about Mars, what are you talking about? Well, I tried to find a picture that had any kind of a face on it, and I couldn't, but I don't know what I'm looking for either.
If you look at, face on Mars, can you see here?
I'll be over in a second.
Okay.
Wait till we go.
If for people out there, listening right now or in the future, all I did was type in "face on Mars," and it's kind of a famous picture, and it looks like and a lot of times I really do think it is just the way the light
is
know what
on.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
like
it
you
really
can see
does
the
look
man
like,
in the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but this is very. I mean, it's
All right,
3D
wait a minute. I'm
kinda.
coming over.
Okay, yeah, and let me try to see if I can get a better picture. So while Lola walks over here, I'll try to get a better picture of. Oh yeah, and so this is the one. This is the famous picture. This is kind of the. I'm on Google Images. The other image that NASA put out, and it was kind of interesting. It really did kind of have a whole press release and everything. Well, here's another picture of it. Kind of, let's pour water on this whole face on Mars thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's, and it's kind of interesting.
What
how
you need to see, aside from just that face, is the whole landscape surrounding it, so you can kind of get some kind of a guide as to distance.
Sure.
And all that, because I know there was a picture taken from the space shuttle of the Earth, and there is, if you catch it just right, it appears to be a face on the Earth,
Really?
just like a face on the moon.
Yeah, and that goes back in the Matrix, and we've talked a lot about ghost pictures.
Yeah.
Our mind really does want to.
I can never see anything on any of those shows until they tell me what I'm looking at, and then it's like, oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
But
Now, if it had been like a Nazca line,
Yeah.
like, whoa, of course there's got to be something there. It's kind of weird.
All right,
gotta
everybody,
go.
it's time for the news. We will be right back. You're listening to Whispers Radio.
Wheeling Symphony in Ogilvy Institute. Tickets start at just $13.50. Call the Symphony at 304-232-6191 to get your seats for this holiday tradition.
Saturday, December 18th, on stage at Wheeling's Capitol Theater, the Wheeling Jamboree presents its Christmas Jamboree featuring Pam Tillis and Jamboree family stars Stacy Grubb, Joe Bonson, and New Outlook Bluegrass. Tickets are available by calling the Capitol Theater box office at
304-233-4470
or Ticketmaster.com. Put a little country in your holiday, December 18th at the Wheeling Jamboree. Doors open at 5:30. Tickets $22.50 and $30.95. RadioJamboree.com for more details.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of WKKX. With local issues, local people, and local hosts. We're starting our own talk radio revolution. One listener at a time. WKKX, the Valley's watchdog. Give us a call and tell us what you're thinking. Locally, 304-214-1600. Out of the area, toll free, 866-514-1600. Live from the Sims Tower in the Robinson Auto Group studio, we are AM 1600 WKKX. The studio that Kellis built. Now it's time for Whispers, your number one source for all things paranormal. With your hosts, Jordan Klein and Nick Queen, and produced by the lovely Lola Miller. Whispers is brought to you by West Virginia Penitentiary Tours at the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville. Unforgettable, historical, educational.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Whispers Radio here on AM 1600 WKKX, the Valley's Watchdog, and UPRN, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. It is 7:09, 47 degrees here in downtown Wheeling. I'm Jordan Klein, he's Nick Queen, and she is the lovely Lola Miller. I announced Brandon last week as Nick Queen.
I know.
Was he okay with that?
He wasn't as happy as you would be if I announced you as Nick Queen.
I'd just be like, hey, that's my name.
Give us a call, 304-214-1600. If you're out of the area, 1-866-514-1600, and that is toll-free.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's kind of been weird sitting at home listening. Because the first way, I'll be honest with you, last week I didn't listen at all. But the first week
we talked about you the entire time.
We did.
Like, I knew I missed something. And I fell asleep, more or less fell asleep. That's the thing I hate about it, because, I was working midnights. You work all day, then you go home and try to get a nap, and it just never seems to work. I mean, you kind of sit there and kind of roll around, just kind of that in-between sleep, I guess. But better than nothing. So, but yeah, no. From that first week, you sound like you did a really good job. So, and I know the one guy said that he, if I remember correctly, one of his favorite. I think he emailed about it. One of his favorite interviews. So, yeah. So good job.
Good times.
Good time. Yeah. And what did you think about the Large Hadron Collider? I really wish I could have been here for that one.
That one was another one of the ones
That made my brain hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did and I was listening.
The second interview on both weeks was like I was in seventh. You were right. Because that's what I was going. Anthropology and that kind of stuff.
And I know you were a little upset that the other guy had to cancel, because I always try to book those because I know that's one of your huge interests is this ancient Sumerian, ancient astronaut kind of thing.
I watched on Turner. They were running. Oh crap! He's an Australian director. Started in Australia, so Gallipoli and all of those. But it was called The Last Wave with Richard Chamberlain, and
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Well, because it was one of his. I forget. But anyway, and it's about a murder that takes place in. I don't know if it's Sydney or not, but it's Aborigines, and it goes back to tribal law. And Richard Chamberlain, I mean, there's a lot of weird metaphysical stuff in it, but one part that they did show was this chamber of Aboriginal antiquities. And I was struck by how closely those sculptures and statues and the artwork resembled Mayan. So I got online and tried to compare Mayan, Inca, and Aboriginal art, which goes back to this premise that at some point in time, all of the continents were pretty much connected.
Yeah.
Because the artwork from way back then is so similar. And we were talking about the huge statues on Easter Island and that kind of. It was just. So yeah, I just had a great time with those guys.
That was Eric, I think, Eric Polterock. Yeah, he was Zachariah Stitchen's webmaster.
Yeah.
I've always been a huge.
We didn't
Zachariah
really talk about Zachariah at all.
Yeah, but you're into his theories and stuff, and that's his life work. And I always liked him talking to. In fact, I even have somewhere the interview, one of his original interviews recorded with Art Bell talking about, and you would have loved him. He just actually passed away not long ago. Zachariah did, and he would have blew your mind. You would have loved him to death. So
well,
if you ever
one
get
of
a
the
chance
things
to look
that
up his stuff.
When we were talking to him was, oil is from vegetation that has been compressed and all this kind of stuff, and it's fascinating that here you have the Gulf of Mexico with one of the largest oil reserves in the entire world sitting under water, which means at some point in time it had to have been a landmass to have gotten the vegetation there to sink and compress and all that kind of stuff to produce all this oil. And that just fell back into the theory that at some point the Earth looked entirely different. And probably some apocalyptic event, perhaps even a meteor, slamming into the earth and really changing. That it's possible that there really and truly was a whole civilization and eons of time that civilization did evolve until this event from probably, like I said, a meteor or something, hit the earth and changed everything.
Yeah.
And of course, then it would literally wipe out any signs of a civilization before that. So it kind of goes to disprove then the theories that Atlantis isn't real. I mean, all of that could have been possible if you had all these land bridges between continents, and the way too that one other thing we were talking about is the way that when you look at South America's contour and Africa's contour, and the fact that they have the same type of vegetation on both coasts where, how in the world would granted, a bird could have flown and deposited a seed, but that's only one species of plant,
Yeah.
or, one type of plant. How can you have so much vegetation being so closely related with an entire ocean between them
And only on the coastlines.
if indeed the land masses hadn't been joined at some point? So I went home thinking, oh, why did I ever get out of anthropology to begin with?
Now, did
Because
you
I
say
just-
The Last Wave? Was that the movie?
Yeah.
Peter Weir.
Yes,
Yeah,
they were
Nora's,
all Peter
Nora's
Weirs.
boy. Thanks for looking that up for her. Yeah,
Gallipoli
I've heard of
is
Peter Weir. Yeah.
that movie. That was Mel Gibson's very first movie, and it is the most disturbing. I mean, I've seen it, but of course I knew how Gallipoli ended anyway.
Yeah, I've never watched that one. Is it worth watching?
Oh, it's and it just at least with me, I'm screaming, at the movie because you know how it ends, and it's terrible, and it's tragic, and it's just pure, simple military ego, and to hell with all these young men and the lives that they gave up for absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and that's
Nothing.
And while we get the guest on the phone, the chat room's been talking about North and South Korea, kind of exchanging.
Speaking of military.
Speaking of military, I guess no reason. I've been watching too much MASH. I don't know. I know you guys make fun of me for watching these old shows, but I've watched them in the past, and when I'm doing other stuff at the house, I like watching. I've always been a big fan, anyways. But do you think anything's going to come of that?
Do I think? I hope not.
I hope not.
Didn't we
either,
lose
but-
that war?
It's actually
What,
just
Korea?
before we bring Korea, we never actually.
That wasn't a war. That was a
well,
police action.
But we also it never ended really. I mean,
It just
Let's say I didn't
it
think
just
we did a
kind
very
of
good job
stalemate,
there.
and
and then we've got the parallel there, and
Yep.
we've got North on one.
there's people standing on each side every day looking at each other, and yeah.
Well,
So
here we go with North Korea, really starting to rattle their sabers. And who knows what they truly have.
Yeah, nobody knows.
That's right.
I know a buddy of mine wrote on his Facebook today. He was a Marine back in the 80s. Said he did his cold weather training, was over in Korea, and said that you could see on the mountainside, it was kind of the way it was gridded. All the trees were like planted in grids. And he's like, you really have no clue what's underneath that.
Yeah.
What's underneath those trees.
and a nice segue to our guest, Paul Hellyer, one of the youngest members of Parliament ever elected. When he was first elected in 1949, youngest cabinet member in St. Lawrence government in Canada, and his new book is, let me get the title right here, "Light at the End of the Tunnel: Survival Plan for the Human Species." As one of the descriptions on Amazon says, the human species is hell bent for extinction, unless we change our attitudes and actions. And I think the Korea escalation kind of, just yet another indicator that. Mr. Hellyer, are you with us?
I am indeed.
It was very nice speaking with you. I know we've kind of been playing tag, for the last couple of months, but I'm finally glad to have you on the show with us.
Right.
So now you're kind of, you fascinate me to some degree, and I don't know too much about you, other than what I've read, I guess, on Wikipedia and and by reputation, your book itself, talks about us, really kind of as a very much, I don't know what the word would be, self-defeating might be a good way of going. We do kind of tend to do things kind of silly when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but I guess we don't look at it that way. We're very self-involved to some degree.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a book everyone should read who is genuinely concerned about the future of our planet as a hospitable place for the human species to live. And I cite three essentials that have to be done. First is global warming. And this is far more urgent than our political leaders worldwide are taking into effect. Frankly, I think our world leaders, just about all of them, are sleepwalking towards disaster. And so they have to wake up, and they have to wake up very fast, or we have to wake them up, one or the other. In our local paper here last Sunday, we had an insert from the New York Times with the headline, "Rising Seas and a Looming Catastrophe." And the New York Times article said that whereas in the 20th century the ocean levels only rose 18 centimeters, that scientists are now predicting that perhaps in this 21st century that they will rise by a meter, and that this will have a devastating effect on coastal cities all around the world. And I don't think these things are being taken nearly as seriously as they should be. And then the second thing, so what I'm saying is that we have to change from a fossil fuel economy to a clean energy economy, and to do it fast. And I suggest 10 years maximum, which is about 30 years shorter, 40 years shorter than what the world leaders are talking about. And then I go on to say in the book that, in my opinion, the exotic fuels exist that are necessary for the transition, but that they're being kept secret by some a very small elite group of people who more or less run the world, and who are doing it for their own advantage because they have tremendous investments in the oil industry. And, in effect, they're putting the future of the world in jeopardy just to enhance their own profits. And then the next thing that I say has to be done is to change the world banking system, because it's a silly system we've got, where private banks create now more than 95% of all the new money that's created every year. It's all created as debt, and it's debt on which interest has to be paid. Yet nobody creates any money to pay the interest. So you don't have to be too much of a genius to figure out, well, if nobody creates any money to pay the interest, what do you have to do? Well, the answer is you have to keep on borrowing more in order to pay the interest on what you already owe. And this just goes on. And if you look around the world, news stories the last few days, first it was Greece that had to be bailed out in Europe, and now it's Ireland. And they say that may not be the end, and it probably won't be unless we change the system very dramatically. And then the third thing that I say is that the world religious factions, the great religions, have to stop killing each other, and to start cooperating in building what I call the kingdom of God, which is just really a world where every child and every young person has clean water to drink, and enough food to eat, adequate clothing, a roof over their head, basic health care, education, enough to test their abilities to go on to greater things and make a contribution to all humankind. In other words, a world of justice. So these are things that have to be done. But of course, as in this book, as in all books that I've read, this is at least written, this is my 13th book, and by far the most important one. It has a silver lining. I say there is light at the end of the tunnel, theoretically, if we get off our butts and do something, and not just talk and sort of go around in circles, which is what we're prone to do.
Well, and I was going to say, we tend to not learn from our mistakes too well, as a species. And of all of those, a lot of those they seem, it's very easy to kind of say them, but it's so hard for us to act on them. I would say, maybe global warming and the, switching off of fossil fuels might be the easiest of what you've said. But I remember reading, and I can't remember where I read it, talking about, at least in the United States, this idea of, if you patent an invention that makes cleaner, more efficient energy use,
right?
That they can stop that from being manufactured. They have that they can classify that to not be used.
Right.
And I can't remember. I wish I could remember where I found that at. And if I'll look it up later today and I'll post it on our website. But that to me, and I'm reading that and I'm thinking, I even checked then. I was like, well, that can't be true. That's stupid. And it's true. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
But they do it. It's just
in my
ludicrous.
book, I say, I forget the exact number now, but the number of what they call secret patents that's been filed in the last 40 years is just stupendous. And heaven only knows what they are. And it's almost certain that many of them would be useful for the common welfare, but we're not able to get at them. And I say that some kind of a body with real authority, real power, has to be able to go through those secret patents and say, hey, this is important to the future of the world, and it's going to be made public. And if the owner of the patent doesn't like it, so be it. But they'll get royalties if the thing is used to provide clean energy or whatever it is that's good for mankind. But we're not going to have people hide things that could save the world and sink with the ship, as it were, just because they have some idiosyncrasy of some kind. Either they're trying to make money or they're trying to be miserable or whatever. And I think you're familiar with some of the things that have been going on in what they call black operations in the last 40 or 50 or 60 years. And they, in my opinion, have developed exotic energies. So the technology is there. It's just getting our hands on it. But you put your finger on a good point a minute or two ago about learning from our mistakes.
Yeah.
And see, I'm a child of the Depression. And I went through that terrible period. And I saw poverty in its rawest form. I remember, people coming to the door almost daily to get a meal to continue to exist for a while. And I had a cousin who later turned out to be the best man at my wedding. And he was an insurance salesman. And when he wore out his shoes, he couldn't afford to have them half-soled. He just put cardboard in the bottom. This is a dastardly state of affairs. Well, then, if you look at the record now, there was a commission in the 1930s, the Senate Monetary Commission, and it was taken over by a chap by the name of Picora, the son of an Italian immigrant, who proved beyond doubt that some of the big banks had brought on the Great Depression deliberately. And, created, unbelievable distress and misery on millions of people all over the world. And so what do we do about the system? Nothing. We just let it go on, and there have been, I think now, 25 recessions and depressions since 1890 in the United States. And there's no end in sight. It's not as if you can say, well, we've had the last one, because the way the system is now, it's not the last one. It's just one more, and this one is the worst one since the Great Depression. And we're frankly doing nothing about it except patching up a few little things. I say it's like patching some boilerplate on an old rusty ship, putting it back out to sea. That's what we've done since the meltdown of 2007.
When it seems it gets more and more fragile as it goes along. I mean, it's you can't sustain it. By the time maybe my kids are, my age, or once I even have kids,
About to say,
I was going to say I don't have any kids, but the idea is it's not going to be. I honestly don't see how the system we have now of, business and banking, and I just don't see how it's going to be around then. And it seems more and more, scary that what we're going to have is nothing there. Now it looks like we're going to have to take a break, but when I come back, I want to go back to talking about, these not necessarily the secret patents, but I know you were, intrigued by the same thing I was with Philip J. Corso and kind of his reverse engineering of ideas from Roswell. Is that correct? If I read this correct?
Yes.
And I want to get into that and how I've been reading. There's got to be stuff there that we could use to help our system. I mean,
you're absolutely right.
And I don't want to kind of get into that and your ideas behind why there is this embargo on the truth, I guess.
All right, everybody, you're listening to Whispers Radio. We got Paul Hellyer on the phone. We're talking about aliens and government. We'll be right back. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Whispers Radio here on AM 1600 WKKX, the Valley's Watchdog, and UPRN, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We got a little bit of an echo. Sunday! Sorry, I had to.
You just had to do it, didn't you?
It went there. Give us a call, 304-214-1600. If you're out of the area, 1-866-514-1600. Our guest on the phone, Mr. Paul Hellyer, he was is he or was he?
Former Deputy Prime Minister.
Deputy Prime Minister. He's a member of the Canadian Parliament, and we're talking about extraterrestrials.
Before the break, we started talking about Philip J. Corso. His book was Day After Roswell, talking about his work in helping the reverse engineering process of the crashed saucer that was recovered at Roswell, or the alleged crash. I guess you go that far. So he was kind of an influence. I guess let's go back. When did you start becoming interested in, extraterrestrial presence on Earth? I guess exopolitics in general.
Well, really, not until about 5 or 6 years ago, when I was Minister of National Defense. I got reports of sightings of UFOs, and about 80% of them were natural phenomena, and about 15 or 20% were unexplained.
Sure.
But at the time, I was too busy to worry about it, because I was unifying the Canadian Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single Canadian Armed Force. And if you don't think that's a difficult job, you should try it sometime. And you can imagine doing something like that in the United States. Anyway, so I wasn't really into it. I was, I guess, an agnostic. I neither believed nor disbelieved. And it was only about 8 years ago or so that I started getting information from a young man in Ottawa called Pierre Juno, and he would send me stuff, every few weeks or months, and I would tell him I was too busy to read it, but I put it in a pile, and if the rainy day ever came and I had time to read something, I would take a look at it. And he sent me this book the day after Roswell, and I looked at it and said, that looks interesting. Someday I'll take that on my holiday to read, and should be fun. So the next summer I looked for it and couldn't find it. And the following summer, which was 2005, I was looking for another book and couldn't find it. And there was the Day After Roswell staring me in the face. So I took it along and started reading, and was fascinated by it. I should say that before this, Juno had persuaded me to watch the ABC 2-hour special put together by Peter Jennings. And I found that very convincing too. So as I read on, I said, this can't be fiction. I don't read much fiction, but the year before I'd read The Life of Pi, and anybody who's read that knows that it's a spellbinder. It keeps you guessing until the end.
Yes, it does. It's really good.
Yeah. And so I finally decided, no, this can't be fiction, because I recognize the names of some of the generals and some of the airfields that were mentioned in the book. And I came to the conclusion that it had to be legitimate.
Yep.
I just received an invitation to speak at the University of Toronto, and I was going to say no. But then as I read on in the book, there were policy implications that were so important for both the United States and the world. So I said, somebody's got to get this out in the open and start a debate about it. So while I was reading, one of my nephews, Philip, came along and said, what are you reading? I told him. He said, I'm a skeptic. So he went home, and a couple of days later he phoned me and said, I was talking to the general, told him what you were reading, and he said, every word of it's true and more. So I finished the book, and it was totally convincing to me, but before I went public, I phoned Philip's friend, the general, who I had met a year or two before that, and he started out right again saying every word is true and more, and he spent about 20 minutes talking about the more, which included the fact that there had been face-to-face meetings between the aliens and representatives of the United States.
Wow.
So with that assurance, I spoke out and said that UFOs were as real as the airplanes flying over our head. And there's no doubt about that. That is the case. What Corso did was not really the back engineering. What he did, well, I guess you could call it, he was slipping new ideas from the Roswell crash into U.S. industry, and then having the industry rediscover them and put them out as new ideas. And
he's kind of the facilitator of that, yeah.
He was the facilitator in charge of that desk in the United States Army. And you can believe that probably both the Navy and the Air Force were doing the same thing at the same time. We had a Canadian that was involved in this business right from early on, too, and I read later, one of his memos, a top-secret memo to his boss in a department that I later was in charge of, the Department of Transport, and he had got information from the United States that the UFOs were real, and that this was a question that the United States government took very, very seriously, that the whole thing was classified higher than the hydrogen bomb, really, and that Dr. Vannevar Bush, one of the most important and best scientists of the time, was starting to work on it, in effect, to back engineers, you say, and see how much of that technology they could replicate. Well, that was back in 1950. So you figure 60 years with some of the best minds in the United States, some of the most educated people and some of the most brilliant people working on this file, what they would have accomplished in the 60 years would be, well, almost beyond belief. It would be spectacular plus. And if you're in the airplane design business, it takes about 7 years to design a new airplane. And what you think you could do with 60 years, and especially if you had the head start of some technology that's been handed to you. So you can be sure that a lot of things have been developed in the last 60 years that the American people know nothing of, and in my opinion, have a right to know about. And some of it is very sophisticated and sorts of things.
And the big, going back to what you were talking about, the first, part of the interview, I'm sure there's something there that could, of course there's stuff there that could better our life, but get away from this dependence on, of course in the U.S. with, the foreign oil or whatever. Get off of oil, period. I mean, and that independence itself would be groundbreaking. I mean, it would be, I guess a paradigm shift.
Earth-shattering.
Yeah, it would just. But I have no idea why. That goes back to the secret patents that you were talking about. I mean, why? Other than to, protect business, and I think that's probably what it all comes down to. Because I really do think that in many ways, most governments are owned by the larger businesses.
There's a small elite group that has tremendous power and really pulls the strings. In my book, Light at the End of the Tunnel, I quote Dr. Michael Wolff, who worked in the underground facilities in Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico.
Really?
And he said that they had developed both zero-point energy and cold fusion. And I've checked out a number of people, checked his veracity and so on, and they say he was an honest man. And I have no doubt that these exotic fuels are available, but are just being kept from us by the cabal, as I call it in the book, a small group of military people in cooperation with some industrialists and bankers who have their own ideas as to how the world should be run.
So are you saying that that's what's at Area 51?
Well, it's somewhere out there. The Area 51, as you know, is divided up into sub-areas, and various things happen in various parts of it. And he worked in 3 different areas, and I mentioned them in the book.
Now, the big question about all of this, before any of this could happen, And yeah, of course, it could always be leaked out privately, like Colonel Corso is doing. But do you think there ever is going to be this, release or disclosure of what's actually happening, akin to Barack Obama or someone else coming out in any country, and I always think it's going to be China or Brazil, one of those comes out and says, yes, UFOs are real. They've been visiting. Here's the evidence that we've collected. I'm calling on the rest of the world to start working towards, whatever.
Some parts of the world have already said as much, but the United States is the one that's lagging behind.
Now, who exactly? Because I've talked to a lot of people. Stephen Bass and so forth. They seem to, nobody's ever said that. Who would you say that has actually come out? I guess the closest I can think of maybe the French or the English. I know they were releasing some documents, but they never really.
I think the French and the Brazilians and the English to a lesser extent.
Sure.
And the Russians, I guess, if you were to be able to check, if you knew the language well enough to be able to check everything they've said about it. But it's nothing is going to happen until the United States Congress takes its responsibility seriously and insists on disclosure. Insists actually on doing their job, which is to know how they're spending the taxpayers' money.
Sure.
Because they've spent hundreds of billions or maybe trillions and don't even know what they've gotten for it. And part of democracy is, and some of us understand it, is that elected representatives are supposed to know what the money's being spent for and be accountable to the people. But in this case, there's just no evidence of that at all. So it's going to be difficult. And then, of course, just if I could have 3 or 4 minutes on the banking thing again.
Oh, go ahead.
Even if you got disclosure of these exotic fuels, then to make the transition in, say, 10 years, which is what I think is, maximum, then it's going to cost trillions of dollars. And you're not going to have it done unless you change the banking system, because at the moment everybody is so far in debt that they can't even meet their existing requirements, let alone spend all of the money necessary for this fast transition. So just go to basics for a minute. Who owns the patent to create money? Well, it's the governments of these countries on behalf of the people. It's something that came down from the sovereign. The sovereigns used to have the exclusive power to create money. Well, then that transfers to governments. And what has happened, though, is this small group of private bankers for about 2 centuries now have managed to wheedle their way into governments and have been very clever about it, to the point where instead of governments creating even some small percentage, like 25 or 30%, they're creating practically nothing. And private banks are creating all of this money as debt. And there is no way of ever getting out of it. It can never be paid off because the money doesn't exist to pay it off with. So we've got to get the politicians of the world to really take a look at this and to start trying to understand how the system works. There's a marvelous book written by a California lawyer by the name of Ellen Brown. I think it's Ellen Hodgson Brown. The name of the book is called Web of Debt. Anybody that read the first 100 pages of that would be ready to start, saying, marching on the banks and marching on the White House and marching on Capitol Hill, and saying, we want action, do something about this. But first of all, they've got to understand how they're being taken to the cleaners before they can go out and demand some sort of change if they don't really know what it is that they're asking for.
But would you say? I mean, because it sounds like at this point, government's pretty much wholesale owned by, these businesses, the elite cartel. Do you think people are going at disclosure the wrong way? That we're kind of demanding government to do it when, they really don't seem prone to do so. Would you say we should go about it a different way, or?
Well, Congress is the only one that has the power.
Sure. And
Congress is the one that has the power over the monetary system too.
Yeah, and that's not going to change.
Well, give licenses to the banks, and what the licenses they give, they could take away or they could amend. I'm not suggesting that the government spend all of the money. I think, frankly, I don't trust politicians to that extent, having worked with them and been one of them for most of my life. But government should print enough of the money that you don't have unemployment like you have in the United States today, which is a tragedy, the worst tragedy since the Great Depression. And it was totally unnecessary. And once again, it looks as if it was an inside job. There's a new documentary put out by a chap by the name of Charles Ferguson called Inside Job, and I recommend that all of your listeners go and see it. And if they don't get excited, I'll be surprised, because the bankers are just a breed apart, and they're totally removed from what I would call the real world. They live in this little world of their own making, and until we can get at them and change the system and clip their wings, really, we're not going to have the kind of world that we're dreaming of and that we should have, because it was our natural heritage. We're just giving it up and gone through these troubled times when it was totally unnecessary.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you for being a...
Can I ask? I promised Avenger.
Okay.
There was one quick question, because I know we're running out of time. And the Avenger on our chat room had asked a question. I want me to ask you. Do you think aliens are living among us, incognito kind of? Do you think, I know that might not be something that you're privy to, but of course, but do you think that would be the case?
The answer is yes, to a certain extent. I don't know to what extent, and I don't know if anybody knows to the whole extent. But
Sure.
I was talking 3 weeks ago, last Saturday, with a chap who was in the United States Air Force, as a meteorologist, who worked in the Nevada Proving Grounds, and he worked with them all the time he was there, got to know them. They scared the daylights out of him, of course, at first, until he got to know them. But he says they have a camp there. They were working in consultation, side by side with the United States Air Force. The United States Air Force was supplying them, giving them new supplies for their scout ships, and the mothership, when it came in, would replenish its supplies there, and that there was an exchange of technology.
Wow.
So this is in the 1960s, and he, in his opinion, is still going on, and I would guess that it probably is.
Wow.
So all of these, there are lots of things going on that we don't know about, and this time we found out, and that's really, right at the end of the tunnel. The survival plan for the human species is designed to try and get people engaged in these issues before it's too late.
Yeah.
No, I know. I'm serious. I do have that book linked up on our website for those that want to get it. It's right under your bio.
It's whispersradio.com for our listeners. Go there. There's a picture. Click on it and go right to the Amazon site.
As well as two of your other books that and I need to get the rest of them up there. So my apology, a little delayed on that, but I have a Miracle in Waiting and a Stop.
Good.
So that way they can get to those. And is there any way that they can reach you if they have any questions? Your website, because I thought I put it on there, and I guess I didn't save that.
Well, I don't know if there is through the website or not, but if not, we'll have to change it in the next 3 or 4 days on some other points. Maybe we can put something there that they can get through.
Was that that was Paul Hellyer?
PaulHellierWeb.com.
Okay. All right, so PaulHellierWeb.com.
Right.
And thank you very much for coming. A very interesting conversation.
It was a pleasure to be with you.
It was an honor,
you.
sir.
Thank you. Honor, yes, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That shows the difference between the United States government and the Canadian government. Because if you asked anyone in the United States government, from a mayor to the president, are there aliens living with us incognito? They would say, any serious questions.
Yeah, I know it.
Or give you the double speak.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
And he just played like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and say this.
Oh, go ahead.
Because, okay, we're wanting to talk about ET and UFOs, stuff like that. This is a government official that just Oh yeah, they've been living with us. You know, he was the secretary, like that's like
He was Secretary of Defense.
He was the deputy. Prime Minister and the Secretary of Defense. He was the.
That's like the vice president. It's like Colin Powell and Joe Biden.
Yeah, he actually was the person that in Canada that united the army, the Navy. I mean, that's a hard. I mean, think of the egos.
Well, it's Gates's job.
Yeah.
The Gates in our.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's a very high up. I mean, and he said he would 15%.
And what I really was struck by is the fact that he is not somebody that has been touting this for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He just, he got hold of the information and he's made this informed decision in just the recent past, So it's not like he's some nut guy that's, been running around that belonged with a tinfoil hat on his head, I mean, that's the difference between our government and
it's funny,
theirs.
he's wanting to talk about banking and stuff like that, and then when you bring up a alien question, it's like, yeah, they exist.
Well,
my buddy worked with them.
He approaches them the same, and to him it is the same thing.
I know, but
it's all connected.
I see that as funny because in our government, there's no way you could have that conversation.
Well, and because he doesn't have the agenda that in our government would.
Yeah.
With him, he has looked at the worldwide financial problems.
Yeah.
And has just, has his real ideas about what needs to be done. Instead of in this country, that is the last thing anybody wants to talk about is how we're printing money. I almost died laughing when he said, first Greece had to be bailed out, now Ireland, and he didn't really say, but we are the next country that is literally on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
We are printing money faster than that little thing up in Times Square can,
spit out the numbers, yeah.
So it just, and I that's why I like to watch like BBC News, because it's really amazing of actually what the world finds important and the world's view on us. And then you look at our media. I mean, how many news stations start out, and I'm talking national news or your big cities, with some ridiculous thing about a pop star or a movie star. That's what leads
Bristol
the news.
Palin.
Yeah, and we got to get home because I got to watch the finals. But over there in Great Britain or in Europe, or I've even caught some Asian stations. If you're lucky, you can find them, and it's amazing. And their attitude toward us.
Yeah,
it's like they just had a minister lose his seat in Parliament because during the election they printed lies about his opponent. So their equivalent of the election board took a look at it and said, absolutely not. You've lost your seat. Goes to your opponent. That's what you get for lying. Now, he did kind of cop to it, but he said, well, it was in a flyer and my campaign people put it out, But their fear over there is that their politics will become like American politics. And it scares them to death when they watch all this crap that and let's face it, our presidential campaign will be starting in about 3 months. So, I just love listening to, foreigners, I guess you could say, hearing their views of us. To him, the financial institutions and global warming and alternative energy sources are far more important than, are there aliens here? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there are. But it's no big deal because they are no threat. While our government would want us to believe that they are a threat if they even exist, and they control us by fear.
Well, and he looks at it more as because he kind of comes at it the same way I always did, was with Philip J. Corso looking at, okay, we have this technology here. This happened. How can we use it? Let's, instead of, fear the aliens, whatever. Okay, we have it. Let's use it to better ourselves. And that's what we've got a problem with global warming. We're dependent on these foreign sources of oil. We're it's hurting our environment. Well, they've got this cleaner energy. Let's use it.
Well, but that then you're flying in the face, A, of huge global corporations, and B, the government. The only thing that both of those things want to look at is how can they benefit, and when it comes to the government, how can something be used as a weapon?
Yeah, and that secret patent thing also just really irritating. And I feel bad. The thing I read about that was actually a conversation on a forum talking about his books. So I was like, wait a second, that was from his book.
Yeah.
Never mind. Oh well.
Okay, who do we got next week?
Next week, Mike Barrow talking about a little bit more UFOs. Kind of his book's The Choice. So we'll be talking with him.
Hey, everybody, have a good Thanksgiving weekend.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Gobble, gobble.
And if you're going out on Black Friday, please be careful. Remember, there's old folks with you.
No trampling the old folks.
Yeah.
No trampling anybody.
Let's not trample this year.
No trampling.
Be nice.
It's a no trample zone.
That's right.
Just
Okay.
You're a Whispers Radio listener. There are standards.
And the stuff's going to be there from now until Christmas.
Christmas,
people.
that's right.
Jeez,
That's
go
right.
online and buy it. Gosh.
Yeah,
Make Monday
Amazon.com has.
a great
Buy it off
Cyber
of our
Monday.
website.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, everybody, until next week, don't be afraid, only believe.